project. The main thing was I was following a tutorial on YouTube that is about 30 videos long and touches on every relevant topic to the brief and then some. And I tried to incorporate as many things as possible into this. Some of the problems I faced were during my sprite creation stage for my main character. This was a fault of my own, but I didn't know this was a thing. I actually had many of the limbs on the wrong layers after implementing this template so I could paint over, because the author of it didn't reorder the limbs properly each time. So if the leg was up here on one sprite and down here on the other, then if I tried to make the layer hidden, it would hide a random limb. It made it quite hard to work with, but at the same time, I have kind of just learned to make my own sprites in a lot more efficient way at the end of the day. When it came to Unity itself and the code, I have never touched on code before, and I hope to never again, but out of all the things I learned, one thing that has been broken the whole project, I restarted my whole project to fix, and it still didn't fix, was the level loading feature that you would see in a couple of my other classmates' work. It's whenever I have my collectible system. Whenever I have my collectible system in Unity, I'm supposed to be able to collect orbs and to hold E to finish my level out, and it will close out that level and load up a new one and spawn in the player again with new orbs, new enemies, and a new layout. But for some reason, whenever I went about it, it would not load at all. It loaded once and it worked once, but then every time after that, it has never shown up with the loading bar circle as many times as I've tried. There's been many issues like this, and one I didn't actually even have time to screen record because it happened very recently within the project, was the parallax background. You may see it in some of these videos, but it is, in the sense, epileptic for some reason. The layering on it seems to have messed up in a way where I can't fix it. I redid the code for it, as it is very simple code, and then you just have to put layer tags on it to make sure it knows which part to be on and how fast to move. For when your player's moving left or right or up or down, it knows which layer to move at what speed. But for some reason these layers would blend into one and then go back and front from each other. It made a lot of problems whenever I was trying to record. I don't know if you'll see that in this presentation, but I thought it was worth mentioning. As for my Unity progress, I have a few videos. The main one here this was somewhat early in the project. This was when I first implemented taking damage to an enemy and my orb collection system at all. After this point, I also implemented the actual win feature, where you collect enough orbs, the portal will unlock at the end of the level, and then you will be able to go through it to see the win screen. You should be able to see that soon. Another problem that arose was the bounding box for my camera. It was the confiner for the Cinemachine. I never knew it, but at the time, when I was first building out my level, I was recording, and then at some point at the top of the screen, it just stopped because I hadn't changed the border. But once I got that done, progress was quite quick for the rest of the project, because up until this point, time management had really been bad on my own part, because I kind of found late into the project, weekly goals did not work for me. I was constantly sitting down on my PC, ready to work, and then just unable to properly put in enough work to make a dent in that weekly. So in the end, to get all this done, I ended up making it daily goals that were much smaller, that I felt would add up in the long run to weekly goals. And this it put me in a much better headspace for working in Unity, especially since it was something I wasn't familiar with. I felt I learned a lot more on this project than I actually thought I would have, to the point where what I had said earlier, my earlier statement in this PowerPoint about hoping to never touch code again, over the course of the project, it did get better, and it is something I would consider multi-skilling in over time, if I ever had the free time to actually sit down and learn it, but I don't feel I would ever go back and do a 10-week project only. I would like to have time to explore all of Unity's systems as well and learn its tools. As for my final gameplay video, I believe it's 3 minutes long, so I have prepared a few notes. There are still some glitches that I have been unable to work out in this final version. It does hit every brief point that I need, such as a pause screen, start and end screen. I even have a death screen. I have enemies. In this recording, 2 of them froze up and the rest of them were doing projectiles. But at one point, whenever I was recording these, I had to take out the parallax background, which is why you don't see it in here. But if you don't mind, I must say, learning Unity and C# was probably the most difficult thing I've done this year. It's much more out of my comfort zone than many of these other topics. And I feel as though if I were to come back and do this again, I would hope to get more time to do so, or a project that would also incorporate some of my own skills. As I feel as I've been quite out of my depth, I absolutely can and will be putting more effort into a project like this if it comes down the road again, but up until that point I've always had less of an affinity for the technical side of game development. I always looked at game art a lot more, which is what I found out quite as a rude awakening at the start of level 5, but it made a lot more of the other units enjoyable. To move on to my next point, when it came to trying to please a target audience and trying to fit the brief at the same time, I mainly wanted to make sure I could have a lack of blood to fit the age rating of 12 to 15. I wanted to make sure I could showcase the brief requirements very clearly, and I wanted to try and actually play into the magical theme, to have some fun with what I could actually do with this project. And although I feel personally it has turned out very bare bones and just it will pass with the brief in mind, but in my own mind I do wish I had done more in the time I had. But this falls onto professional practice, which I have a slide on later but I would like to touch on now anyway, is that eventually I started really keeping up with my Trello board and my Miro board because I set a project planner on there as well, which you will see later. That and a weekly plan, which I hadn't kept to as much as I talked about, it was a much more